I know we've had a number of street tracks in America recently, however there are just so many to get through that there may be periods where we have constant street tracks from America. I'm sorry, it's just the way it goes sometimes. Anyway, it's time for another dose of classic IMSA brilliance. This time we're in New Orleans, which held 3 IMSA races, in the guise known as the Grand Prix du Mardi Gras. Those 3 races took part in 1991, 92 and 1995. However, there is an important thing you should know, in that this race took place in June in the first 2 years, a time where the humidity, heat and rain were some problematic factors for this event, as it wasn't a particularly good scenario for spectators. The 1991 track was incredibly short, exactly 1.3 miles in length, with just 9 corners, 7 to the right and just 2 to the left. That didn't mean though that the circuit didn't have its challenges or lack character. Now the IMSA GTP cars are deceptively big machines, maybe not in height, but in length and width they very much are. Just look at how narrow the course is. They might as well be driving limousines on this track as far as the drivers are concerned. The whole circuit is pretty much accelerate at 1,000,000 miles an hour, brake exceptionally heavily for one of the 90-degree corners that pretty much make up this entire track, and then accelerate into another dimension again. I'd go as far as saying that this is sports car racing's version of Martinsville. Slow, tight, bumpy, and never having a chance to take a breather. However, that's perhaps why I quite like this track. It's a proper challenge for the drivers. Plus, this circuit had its quirks. It ran underneath a bridge between the start and finish lines. Oh, and yes, the race did have different start and finish line spots on the track. I'm not exactly sure why, because if the aim was to try and have a double file start, then that wasn't achieved when the race did begin. So they may as well have made the start and finish line the exact same place, and cut some cost on making a small gantry for the flag marshal to frantically wave his green flag. Plus, this track had what must be one of the most incredible pit lanes I've ever come across. Now, I'm aware that pit lanes in street circuits are limited by the landscape of the location. However, this pit lane is... I can't think of how best to describe it. The pit lane entry is marked by small cones which nearly cut the already narrow track width in half. You then take a left past an inflatable Nissan Motorsport Man, doesn't have quite the same ring as Michelin Man, take some equally tight right-handers to where you then get to your pit boxes. Then there's the pit exit. This is the creme de la creme of subpar pit lanes. I don't think we can delve any lower than this in terms of pit lanes. However, if you know of any, then please say in the comment section. I'd love to know what you think is worse than this. Rain also fell during this race, which caused the slick-tyre GTP cars to be nearly undrivable. It made for some pretty sights, which I think would look awesome with modern day camera technology. However, that's not what the drivers were thinking, that's for sure. Especially as their race would be lasting 2 hours. Perhaps to the drivers' blessings, the course would be changed for 1992. In fact, it would be changed completely. It was taking place around the grounds of the Louisiana Superdome, on a 10-turn track that would be much longer than before. This one was an incredible 1.43 miles long, a huge 0.13 of a mile longer than the previous track. Okay, I'm perhaps taking the mickey here, but still, it was a bit longer than before. It was much wider than before as well. Plus, the pit lane was fairly normal. The layout of the roads did allow for that to be infinitely better than before. A smooth blend entering and exiting the pit lane, with plenty of width to do the necessary work. Also, the start-finish line was a start-finish line, not in separate places like they were before. The width made it an infinitely better track to do what a racetrack is meant to do: produce good racing. Some really nice corners on this track as well, not just the usual 90-degree street track turns. Corners where you can take some decent speed, plus they're incredibly bumpy, adding to the challenge level of this circuit. However, there was one issue with this track. which was the first corner at the start of the race. It was basically a tight chicane, which when trying to fit GTP cars doing a double file start, which you could do on this track, it didn't really work all that well. After a hiatus, the racing returned to the streets of New Orleans in 1995, with the track being exactly the same as 1992, including the troublesome starting chicane. The difference being it was this time held in October rather than June. However, that would prove to be the last year of racing at this track. The circuit wasn't a big hit with spectators because unfortunately, when the race was initially held in its June time slot, the local businesses weren't happy with the disruption of the closed streets, and spectators weren't keen on sitting outside in the high heat and humidity. Moving the race to October made things better from a climactic perspective. However, when IMSA returned, the GTP cars were gone, and the series wasn't as big of a draw as it was before. So racing was no longer taking place on the streets of New Orleans. However, for me, when researching these tracks and watching races on these tracks, they just looked awesome. Especially the first track, because the GTP cars looked so out of sorts on that track, it made the spectacle of them racing around there all the more enjoyable. As a racetrack, it was pretty terrible, because passing was done in complete faith rather than near enough complete certainty. However, as a spectacle, it was great to watch. Racing will never return to that track, but I'm glad it's a part of motorsport history. That though is going to be it for this video. Thank you very much for watching. What are your opinions on these tracks? Were they tracks that could have succeeded if the race was originally held in October? Or do you think its pathway to success was about as likely as attempting to rejoin the circuit cleanly from the pit lane on the first layout? Say what you think in the comment section down below, along with any other street tracks you'd like to see featured in this series. Until the next video though, enjoy the rest of your day.